The motion that we're discussing today is does society need religious faith? Need being quite a strong word, and I think there's problems with both the religion and the faith aspect of that. I think faith is a problem in itself. I think faith in the context of believing things disproportionately to the currently best available evidence can cause problems, particularly when it's combined with dogma. And that can be applied on a religious basis or on a secular basis. We've seen what faith in fascism has done, we've seen what faith in the unregulated free market has done, we've seen what faith in communism has done. Faith and dogma are dangerous, independently of whether they're applied to secular or religious projects. However, I believe that religious faith is more dangerous than secular faith, because when you have problems with the unregulated free market or communism or whatever secular project that people might put faith in, you kind of notice the problems because the ideologies bump into reality and you notice that they're not working. And however you deal with that, the test is there that you notice that they're not working, and so you generally speaking, people will adjust their beliefs based on the evidence of reality. Whereas with religion, the testability is hidden in an imaginary afterlife. And so it is more resistant to people noticing that it's wrong, or at least people being able to conclude that it's wrong, because of the combination of the persuasive nature of an afterlife, of an eternity of bliss being supposedly revealed to you by the creator of the universe, combined with the untestability until after you die of that assertion. So I think it's more important to challenge intellectually religious faith than it is to challenge intellectually secular faith, because religious faith does not bump into reality in the way that secular faiths do. In terms of society generally, there is a team of interdisciplinary social scientists around the world that have been conducting over the last 20-25 years or so a project called the World Values Survey. And they've been doing that around all the continents, and they have mapped over 70% of human values onto two axes. And one is a personal axis, and that axis is of going from survival values to self-expression values. And the second axis is an axis for society of going from traditional religious values at one end of the scale to secular rational values at the other end of the scale. And what they are discovering is around the world, with the exception of Africa, which, whatever the reasons, is an exception to this trend. In all other parts of the world, the trends are the same, but at different speeds in different parts of the world, individuals are moving from survival values towards self-expression values. The trigger for that is investment in things like health, education, communications technology, democracy. Those triggers enable people, individuals, to move from self-expression values, from survival values towards self-expression values. And the cumulative effect of a lot of people doing that tips society from moving from traditional religious values towards moving towards secular rational values. So that's the trends, that's what's happening now. Are they good? Are they bad? I mean, different people will have different opinions. I think rather than just give my own opinions, I'm going to tell you about some social science results that have been compiled in 2009 by Phil Zuckerman, who's a professor of sociology, who asked that question by going to the data and finding out what data has been done in terms of the relationship between atheism and secularity and well-being, and whether the stereotypes that people have about the impact of secularism and atheism on society are true or whether they are false. And from researching a whole range of empirical studies, what has been found in terms of values, beliefs and worldviews is that atheists and secularists are less nationalistic, less prejudiced, less anti-Semitic, less racist, less dogmatic, less ethnocentric, less closed-minded, less authoritarian. Atheists and secularists are more politically tolerant, more supportive of gender equality, more supportive of abortion rights, more supportive of gay rights, less supportive of the death penalty, less supportive of prison as retribution, and less supportive of government torturing terrorist suspects. And in fact, on that last one, the more deeply religious people are, the more likely they are to support torture. In terms of criminality and moral conduct, studies have shown that atheists and secularists are, in some instances, are more likely to commit certain types of crime, typically underage alcohol consumption and illegal drug use. But in terms of more serious crimes, the murder rate is lower in secular nations, higher in religious nations. If you take America as a sort of an example of a country where the same laws apply more or less across the country with their different states, the murder rate is lower in the more secular states and is higher in the more religious states. Of the top 50 safest cities in the world, most are in relatively non-religious countries. In terms of altruism, there's different stats on this. Some studies show that religious people are more likely to give money to charities. The Irish census shows that religious and non-religious people are equally likely to give time and or money to charitable activities. Secular countries certainly are far more likely to donate more to poorer nations in terms of aid. There are two studies of the Holocaust that shows that the more secular people were, the more likely they were to rescue and help persecuted Jews during the Holocaust. In terms of life satisfaction, this is one where it's pretty tricky to conclude. It's pretty tricky to conclude in any of this what the cause and effect is. We're just talking about correlations. But it's slightly more complicated in terms of life satisfaction. There are correlations that show that there's a positive relationship between being more religious and having more positive mental health outcomes in a range of areas. However, those seem to be more attributable to activities associated with being involved in a religion rather than the act of believing in a God. There's one area where that's slightly different, which is in terms of anxiety about death. People with a strong religious belief are less anxious about death than people with a weak religious belief. However, people who are not religious at all are the least anxious of all, which kind of makes sense if you think about it, that if you either don't believe that there's anything to worry about, or you believe you're going to heaven, you're not going to be as anxious about it, whereas if you're weak religious and you believe but have doubts, then you're more likely to be concerned about what might happen to you after you die. In terms of family and children, atheists and secularists have lower divorce rates in a study in the USA, lower family size generally. Atheist and secular parents tend to foster a questioning attitude among their children rather than an obedient attitude among their children. And atheist and secular parents are less likely to support corporal punishment of children. In terms of sex and sexuality, atheists and secularists are more likely to have premarital sex, less likely to view things like masturbation as wrong, less likely to buy online pornography. In fact, one of the studies in terms of online pornography that was that in order to exclude the fact that different types of pornography are legal or illegal in different states, just searched or measured the amount of online searches per capita of different nations for three types of pornography that are generally illegal, no matter what regime you're living under, which were bestiality, paedophilia, and rape pornography. And of the 10 countries that had the highest per capita people searching for those terms on the internet. 9 of them are Islamic states. Secular states have less sexually transmitted diseases, infection rates, and less teen pregnancy rates. And possibly the reason for that can be found in another study that is part of this series of studies, which is that teenagers who make religiously inspired virginity pledges are just as likely to have sex anyway as teenagers who don't. However, the teenagers who have made religiously inspired virginity pledges tend to have unprotected sex, and that tends to lead to the fact that STD rates and teen pregnancy rates are far higher in religious countries, and particularly if you take America, are far higher in the Bible Belt countries or states than they are in the more secular states. One thing that I think is particularly significant, and I'll end with this. I'll say one more thing first. I want to say about secularism. That secularism on its own is not the solution in terms of removing the problems that are caused by religion. It's secular democracy. Authoritarianism of any kind, whether it's religion or secular, militates against subjective well-being amongst people. So the secular element of it removes the problems caused by religious faith, and the democratic element of it removes the problems caused by authoritarianism or dogma. And the final thing that I want to say is we tend, because we're in Ireland, where there's a fairly strong religious background generally, and people who are atheists are atheists generally because they are actively rejecting the belief system that a lot of us grew up in. But that's not the situation in every place throughout the world. And particularly if you look at the Scandinavian nations, where Phil Zuckerman did, as well as this research that he did, spent a couple of years writing a book on the Scandinavian approach to belief in God. And what he found there is that most people in Scandinavia, it's not a big issue for them. It's not that they're rejecting God in the sense of they think it's a bad thing. It's just that they live in a secular society where the idea of being religious is just, it's a private thing for whoever is interested in it, and for most people, they're just not interested in it. And there was one incident that he described, which I thought was quite telling. He said that he was on a train journey to Copenhagen that was lasting a couple of hours. And he happened to sit opposite 3 women who were in their 30s, who were going to a conference. And they were chatting, and he was explaining what he was doing. And he said, look, would you mind if I do an interview with you, just to add to my research? And they said, fine. And he started off, and he took out his pad, and the first question he asked them was, do you believe in God? And the first 2 said, no, they don't, just straight away. And the third one sort of paused and was sort of looking out the window, and he said he was wondering, what she was going to say. And what she said is, I've never really thought about that. And her response was quite significant. It wasn't that she didn't believe in God because of some atheistic or agnostic philosophical position. It's just that she had managed to get through 30 plus years of life without it even being an issue for her to think about whether there was a God or not. And that's the type of secular society that I think is useful. A secular society where people treat each other on the basis of empathy and compassion and reciprocity, rather than on the basis of what other people believe that the creator of the universe is telling them to impose on other people. And where people try to ascertain the nature of reality and try to investigate the real mysteries that are there using evidence and using the scientific method as the best way of doing it. And recognising that there may be mysteries that we will never solve. And it may take for us to evolve into another type of species that may be capable of understanding some of the mysteries, just as a dog or a cat can't do algebra today. But whether we discover them or not, simply inventing an answer and saying that it's the creator of the universe and, by the way, he's told me to tell you to do this is not an appropriate way to respond to it. Thank you very much.